ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
You can do quite a lot with 3.5 hours of live radio.
Welcome to Radio National Breakfast.
Cyclone Trump has well and truly hit the Middle East.
We cannot leave Belarus as consolation prize for Putin.
Mr. Trump's decision really shocked us.
If I can use the word bollocks on air, I'd use it.
It's almost a redraw of the space race here between America and China.
It is fascinating.
So catch up on the morning's news with a new podcast, The Breakfast Wrap. Search Radio National Breakfast in the Listen app and we'll see you there.
Hi, it's Sam Hawley here. We're working really hard behind the scenes on something a little different, a special series all about the housing crisis, and we want your help. If you want to be part of the show, record a voice note telling us in a few words who or what you think is to blame for the housing crisis, and send it through to ABC News Daily at abc.net.au. Now to today's episode. Donald Trump says he loves tariffs, but just hours after he slapped massive ones on Mexico and Canada, he's taken them away. So what on earth is the US president up to? And how's the global economy responding? Today, ABC TV's finance expert Alan Kohler on what Trump's tariff moves mean for us. And a warning, it's not great. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Alan, there was a time when we were all questioning whether Donald Trump would really impose the tariffs that he'd threatened throughout the campaign. And, well, he was serious, sort of.
Donald Trump has declared war. The US president has put a 10% tariff on imports from China, rising to 25% for Mexico and Canada. That started a tit-for-tat trade war in which Canada has already returned fire.
Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on Canada will be postponed by at least 30 days, according to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The reprieve for Canada comes after an earlier deal to pause tariffs was struck with Mexico.
Just tell me what is going on.
Well, I think it's reasonable to still question whether he's going to impose the tariffs. I mean, yes. He certainly used the announcement of the tariffs on the weekend as a negotiating tool to get what he wanted out of Mexico and Canada, and he appears to have got something out of them, which has led to the tariffs being paused.
Yeah, so he announced a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, and also a 10% tariff on China, which we'll get to later. But then he's paused both of those. A 25% tariff for Mexico and Canada would have been crippling, wouldn't it?
Well, it certainly would have had a big impact on those countries, their exports into the United States. That's absolutely true. And it would have obviously had a big impact on the American economy too, because it puts up the prices of those products. And a lot of American cars are being made in Mexico now, and as well as Canada.
Yeah, okay. So he's come to some sort of deal with Mexico and with Canada, with the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the outgoing Prime Minister. They've had a number of conversations. It all relates really to the border, doesn't it?
Mexico has promised to send 10,000 National Guards troops to the border. So we'll see if that comes to pass or if it makes much of a difference. With Canada, Trudeau said they're going to push ahead with a border reinforcement plan that's worth about $1 billion Canadian dollars.
This, in part, is obviously a response to what Donald Trump says is the failure of Mexico and Canada to stem the movement of migrants and illegal drugs into the United States.
So we don't know the exact details, of course, of what's going on behind the scenes and during these phone conversations that Donald Trump is having with these leaders. But it's clear, isn't it, that he's using the threat of tariffs as a source of leverage, a negotiating tool of some sort.
Well, that's certainly true so far. What we don't know really is whether Trump wants to impose tariffs or does he just want to threaten them. I mean, I suppose at some point when you're threatening the use of something like that, you've got to actually do it. Otherwise, people will just not take you seriously. So I suppose if he's going to continue to threaten to use them, he's at some point going to have to do it to make the threat worthwhile.
Yeah.
A lot of the tone of his campaigning was that he loves tariffs in general, wants to impose tariffs.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. Then I was reprimanded by the fake news. They said, what about love, religion, and God? I said, I agree. Let's put God number one. Let's put religion number two. Love, I don't know. We got to put that number three, I guess, right? And then it's tariff. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us.
The thing is that tariffs they're just a tax on, like a GST on imports. And so you can see why someone like Trump would think they were great, because they raise money like a GST does, but they also tend to block imports and or make imports more expensive, and therefore increase local production and theoretically at least local jobs.
But, Alan, let's consider what all this might mean for us, because if the US president can slap a 25% tariff on Canada and then remove it, sure, but that's, one of the United States' closest allies. I mean, they are very good friends, or they have been. He could do it to us, another ally, couldn't he?
He could, except that America has a trade surplus with Australia, not a trade deficit. They've got a trade deficit with Canada and with Mexico and with China, and Trump seems to hate deficits. He believes that any country with which they've got a trade deficit, they're robbing America, and that's what he's kind of been on about. So presumably he doesn't think that of Australia. We've got a trade surplus with them, so it's, they're robbing us in those terms.
Yeah, so a trade surplus is where a country's exports exceed its imports, right?
Yeah, that's right. So they're exporting more to us than they're importing from us.
Yeah. So he likes that. And history shows us that, doesn't it? Because Malcolm Turnbull, during the last Trump presidency, he managed to negotiate out of tariffs that Trump had wanted to put on steel and aluminium. Just remind me about that.
Yeah, well, it was, again, a negotiation, and as you say, Turnbull managed to turn that around.
Navigating the presidential temperament has been a white-knuckle ride, but Australia looks like dodging the Trump tariff wall.
I was very pleased to see the President acknowledge explicitly today the strong points that I've been making to him.
The thing is that if what happens is the trade war, a global trade war breaks out in general, then that'll damage the Australian economy. That won't be good for anybody, including Australia. So that's the last thing we want, is for these kind of tariffs to go ahead on any country, really, because it would lead to a global trade war, which is going to possibly cause a global recession, which we would get roped into. And Trump is threatening tariffs against Europe now.
Yes.
I mean, and that really would be serious, I guess. Or if he put bigger tariffs on China than he's promising.
Yeah, because China is our largest trading partner. So that will really have an impact on us.
Well, obviously, if China had big tariffs, then their exports to America fell. They would presumably have to buy less raw material from Australia. So that would lead to a problem for Australia, for sure.
And the EU, I mean, would that have a big impact on us too?
Well, only to the extent that if there was a general trade war, then the global economy would suffer, and so would Australia's, I guess. I mean, but the thing is, the other thing is that it is already suffering to the extent that there's complete chaos going on. Nobody knows what's going on. Yes. Nobody knows what's happening. I mean, so we have this huge increase in policy uncertainty, which itself is damaging to the economy because people don't want to invest now. Companies need to have some sort of certainty in order to invest. And certainty is suddenly at a premium.
Yes. And not to mention, or dare we mention, the Australian dollar, Alan.
The Australian dollar's been declining for a while because of the anticipation of tariffs to some extent. I mean, what happens when tariffs are imposed, the currencies do tend to adjust to basically remove the impact of the tariffs. So if, for example, America put a 25% tariff on Canada, and the Canadian dollar fell enough, it would offset the impact of the tariff because the price of the Canadian products would decline by 25%. to offset the impact of the tariff. So what's been happening is the US dollar has been rising very strongly because the markets have been anticipating the tariffs that Trump's been promising. And the US dollar went up again on Monday, which led to the Australian dollar falling to another 5-year low. So if these tariffs do go ahead, then you can expect the US dollar to keep rising and the Australian dollar will fall below 60 US cents.
Oh my gosh. All right. What else though, Alan, for us? I see some reporting that these sort of tariffs could actually delay a rate cut here. Is that possible?
Well, yes, theoretically. I mean, if the Australian dollar is really weak, it would tend to be inflationary because it puts up import prices. I mean, the Reserve Bank tends to look through those things. I mean, it would need to be a big fall. I mean, the Australian dollar fell to 48 US cents back in year 2000 when there was the US internet bubble and also the Asian crisis, the Asian currency crisis of the late 90s. That led to a big fall in the Australian dollar, and that kind of was inflationary to some extent. The other thing with tariffs is, as I said, they are like a GST in the sense that they are one-off increases in price, and central banks do tend to look through those sort of things.
Well, Alan, it is, as you mentioned, rather chaotic, to put it mildly. So what do you make of all of this? Do you think Trump is really going to go down this path which will cause these trade wars, or is it all just bluster?
Well, I'm glad to say I'm not inside Mr. Trump's mind. But look, I do think it's possible we're in for 4 years of chaos.
Oh, yes.
What Trump is doing is throwing out the usual methods of diplomacy, the kind of, the careful, tactful way that diplomacy proceeds, where countries kind of talk to each other in code, really, and, are sort of very careful. They have multilateral meetings and all this stuff. I mean, Trump is pulling the US out of the Paris Agreement on climate change. He's pulling it out of the World Health Organization. Goodness knows what he's going to do to the World Trade Organization. So a lot of these kind of multilateral processes are getting chucked out. He's upending the normal processes of diplomacy. So he and his people and possibly his voters would see this as a breath of fresh air in a way. I mean, he's going to say this is what we need to do. We need to throw our weight around
to make America great again, according to him.
Make America great again. Sure, that's right.
But what does it mean, though, Alan, for the stability of the global economy when there is so much uncertainty?
I have no idea. I mean, I think it's so interesting.
Yes.
It's really interesting. I mean, can we sort of get by with someone rampaging around like a bull in a china shop? I mean, is that going to be okay if somebody comes out and there's the president of the United States and saying stuff like that and doing stuff? I mean, it's going to be fascinating. I do think that, the chaos and uncertainty will tend to close down investment, and that won't be great for the economy at all. And also, it seems to me what he and Elon Musk are doing to the US government is going to be pretty difficult for the economy over there to deal with. I mean, if they really do sack tens of thousands of public servants, what's that going to do to the economy? And if they really do deport millions of illegal migrants, that's going to cause a massive recession in the United States if they can pull that off.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Really do. It's still the question, isn't it? Will he really do it? Well, time will tell. Thanks, Alan.
No worries. Thank you.
Alan Kohler is the ABC's finance expert. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Cara Jensen-McKinnon. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.